John Zizolfo. John Zizolfo says, I'm primarily a model builder and have grown my conversion parts business over the past 10 years. I found that the biggest skill I've developed over that time is a different mindset toward how parts are designed to fit together for assembly by someone else later, as opposed to a one-off build for myself. What sort of mindsets have you developed over the years towards design and construction? Oh, this is great. Yeah, of course you've developed different mindsets because you've gone through so many different iterations of making a part, that part going to someone else, that person working with that part, and you getting feedback about that. And what I love about pursuing mastery, and that's really what we're talking about here. We're not just talking about gaining a skill, because you can gain a skill and then just have that skill and use it. But what you're talking about is a process where as you get older, you get better. And as you get better, you think differently. And that is the pursuit of mastery to me. Look, some people gain a skill and they just execute that skill and they're not interested in getting better at that. And that's fine. I do have skills I'm not interested in getting better at. And if I really needed a high quality output from them, I'd hire someone to do it. But for a lot of things I do, I am pursuing a mastery. And the reason I do is because I love how your mindset changes. I love how you learn to ask better and different questions the more mature you get. And so in your very beginning, you're just trying to solve for yourself because that's the only frame that you have to work from. You only have your own feedback. So you work with your own feedback, you assume it's somewhat universal, and then you start sending it out to other people. You find out it's not universal. That all these people have all these other approaches than you do. And you start to realize that you could incorporate their approach and make things easier. And that also changes sometimes your perspective on yourself. And this breathing, this oscillation of expanding the narrative around the things that you build and understanding what's going to happen. What a craftsperson, an expert, isn't someone who screws up less. They can just, from experience, they can see the mistakes coming from longer away and they can accommodate for them. That means sometimes that they can just like skate out of the way and it goes past like bullet time. That other times that might mean they know the mistake is coming and they're just gonna have to take it, but they have the institutional knowledge to know exactly how to process that. I find the mindset that I love is, how is this thing going to fail? What are the failure modes? What is the worst case scenario? And how can I subvert that? I mean, all of these things are like, you could write out to any degree of specificity you want, like the full range of activities required to acquire a certain skill. You can write out everything you could think of, and you're still not going to cover 1% of what an expert in that actually knows. And it's because a lot of what an expert actually knows after years of doing something is this very hard to quantify, hard to define knowledge about prioritization. Specifically, this will get me this result for this much labor, this will get me this result for that much labor, and which do I do? Ted Woodford is always talking about it on his YouTube channel. I could do a neck reset on this, but the guitar is not really worth it, but the owner wants it, so I am going to do it. It is all about, because time is always the limiting factor for employment, for work, for getting something done. It's always about refining the decision trees and getting better at seeing farther into the future. That's what I love. So, yeah, almost everything that I do is constantly giving me a slightly better perspective on all the things that I do. That's frankly why I do it. So I just did a job for hire. Actually, someone else asked something about this, and I'm gonna tell this. Yeah, here we go. Sky Shadow 3246 said, failure is always an option was a common refrain during Mythbusters. Do you find yourself repeating that to yourself in your current builds when things go wrong? No, not really. Mostly what I think to myself is, oh, okay, I'm gonna build this thing, and if it screws up, it'll be fine for the camera. Like, that'll be a lovely narrative beat. But recently, reader, I took a job for hire. Somebody asked me to bid on a thing. I gave them a bid. A few months later, they came back and said, we'd love to activate this job. And a few days ago, I shipped off this thing that I built. I'll be able to talk about it at some point. But it is the first work for hire, like someone wants an object, I build that object and ship it to them. It's the first work for hire I've done in the better part of 2 decades. And one of the things that I was surprised about was like, no, failure's not an option. This is a client. Like, there's a blemish. I got to deal with that. I can't just talk about that as like, oh, it happens to all of us makers on camera. No. I have to make this client happy, and I want to turn out the best thing I could for this job. It was surprising to feel that old stress of wanting to please the client. And I've had a very lucky last 20 years where I've been able to sort of communicate to you in various mediums like this, but servicing a client who wants a museum quality object, that phrase has very specific parameters around it. And if I missed that mark, it would have been obvious. So I found delight in the exercise of tapping into a 20-year-old part of my brain I haven't activated in a long time to look at things from a new perspective. And it's not like the stress is bad. It's just there, It's part of the working life is stressing out about your job. Yeah. So the answer is failure is not an option, not for the client. They don't care about your video channel. TX Longhorn 82 says they have a 5-gallon bucket full of screws from PCs and they want to separate them by type and size. Besides doing it manually by sight and hand, can you think of or have you ever seen a contraption for sorting that might work in this application? Not for screws. No. For quarters, sure. Eggs, yeah. But for screws, no. I'll tell you the way I recently dumped a couple of bins by accident and I had to resort. I actually ended up resorting the entire bucket of drywall screws that spilled earlier this year. And the way I did it was interesting. I wasn't doing it one at a time. I was more like, okay, let me grab the longest ones I can see. And so with just both hands, grabbed all the longest ones I could see and put them in a pile. And then I grabbed all the second longest ones I could see and put them in a pile. And so each pass, I was just kind of, which of these is the super most obvious one to me? Okay, now that most of those super long ones are gone, now the super shorties are becoming really obvious. So I pulled all the super shorties. And eventually, over a couple of hours, faster than I thought it would take, I was able to sort through a full bucket full of drywall screws. Again, I did that off camera. I needed to concentrate. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to support us even further, you can by becoming a tested member. Details are, of course, below, but it includes all sorts of perks, and we're building them all the time. You get advanced word and behind-the-scenes photos of some of our projects. Questions, you get to ask direct questions during my live streams, and we have some members-only videos, including the Adam real-time series of unbroken, unedited shots of me working here in the shop. They are weirdly meditative. Thank you guys so much. I'll see you on the next one.